In the heart of a land torn apart by war and silence, where fear ruled and hope seemed like a forgotten dream, a people cried out for deliverance. Israel was drowning beneath the weight of despair, its villages desolate and its roads abandoned. Every dawn felt heavy, as though even the sun hesitated to rise upon such sorrow. Yet in the midst of this darkness, a quiet force began to stir, an awakening not born of swords or armies, but of faith. Amid the ruins of courage and the echoes of battle, a woman rose. Her name was Deborah, though to her people she was far more than that. She was a prophetess, a judge, a vessel through whom the voice of the divine spoke. In an age when women were seldom seen as leaders, she defied the order of her time. While others grasped steel, she wielded wisdom. Her strength was not in her hands, but in her heart, not in her might, but in her unwavering connection to God. Each day, under the soft rustling of a tall palm tree that bore her name, Deborah sat to listen. Men and women from every tribe came with burdens too heavy to bear, disputes too tangled to solve. There, beneath the branches that reached toward heaven, she rendered judgment, not from pride or power, but from truth whispered by the Almighty. That tree became a living symbol of her spirit, deep-rooted in faith, rising unshaken amid the storms. Her voice, calm and steady, carried across the land like the wind before the rain. The people trusted her, not because she demanded authority, but because she embodied it. They saw in her the reflection of divine order, a reminder that God's presence had not abandoned them, even as enemy chariots thundered across their fields. To those who listened, Deborah's words felt like light filtering through the smoke of despair. But Deborah could feel something shifting within her spirit, the silence before a storm, the breath before a miracle. For years, Israel had suffered under the iron hand of King Jabin and his ruthless commander, Sisera, whose 900 chariots crushed every rebellion into dust. Yet Deborah sensed that heaven was about to intervene in a way that no mortal could foresee. As she looked across the hills of Ephraim, she saw not the scars of defeat, but the promise of victory. Her heart stirred with a certainty that went beyond logic or sight. She knew that God was preparing to act, that his plan was already unfolding. The time for waiting was over. The time for courage had come. Her faith became the spark that would ignite a nation. Where others saw ruins, Deborah saw foundations. Where others heard cries, she heard a call. And though she was one woman standing against empires, she understood that when God moves, even a whisper can shake the earth. The nights grew longer and the stars seemed to burn brighter, as though heaven itself was watching. Deborah prayed not for her own glory, but for strength to fulfill the divine purpose laid upon her shoulders. She asked not for the fall of her enemies, but for the rise of her people. Every vision she received carried the weight of prophecy. Each word that came to her heart was a thread in a tapestry only heaven could weave. Her spirit trembled not from fear, but from awe at what was to come. For she knew the moment would arrive when her voice would call Israel to arms, not in the name of vengeance, but in the name of deliverance. And so, beneath the palm that bore witness to countless pleas and tears, Deborah waited. The air grew heavy with destiny, and even the winds seemed to whisper her name. Soon the messenger would come, and through her faith the chains that bound Israel would begin to break. Because sometimes God does not send thunder or kings. Sometimes he sends a woman with fire in her heart and heaven in her voice. When the voice of heaven finally stirred within her, Deborah knew the time for silence had passed. The years of oppression under King Jabin and the cruel commander Sisera had drained the people of their courage, but God had whispered a command that could no longer be ignored. Rising from beneath her palm tree, she sent word through the tribes of Israel, calling upon a man chosen for this divine purpose, a warrior named Barak, known for his strength and his unwavering heart. Barak arrived before Deborah not as a conqueror, but as a man uncertain of the weight now resting upon his shoulders. The prophetess looked into his eyes and without hesitation spoke the words given to her by the Almighty. "Gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun and march to Mount Tabor, for there the Lord will deliver Sisera into your hands." Her tone was steady, her faith immovable, and yet Barak felt the tremor of destiny in her voice. But Barak hesitated. He had seen the devastation of Sisera's iron chariots, the endless storms of metal that no man could withstand. "I will go," he said finally, "but only if you go with me." Deborah did not rebuke him for his fear. She understood that courage is not the absence of trembling, but the choice to walk despite it. With calm resolve, she answered, "I will go with you. But know this, the victory will not be yours. The Lord will hand Sisera into the hands of a woman." Those words hung in the air like prophecy carved in stone, and yet no one could have imagined how they would come to pass. Deborah and Barak began to prepare the army, gathering the scattered tribes that had nearly forgotten what unity felt like. For the first time in years, the men of Israel stood shoulder to shoulder, not as wanderers or slaves, but as brothers bound by faith. The sound of swords being sharpened echoed through the valleys, and fires burned across the hillsides. Yet amid the noise of preparation, Deborah's voice rose in prayer, her words soft but powerful. She prayed not for vengeance but for courage. She prayed that each soldier would see not the enemy before them, but the hand of God leading them. And as her voice reached the heavens, the winds seemed to shift, carrying her words across the barren fields. When dawn came, the prophetess and the warrior stood side by side, looking toward the distant silhouette of Mount Tabor. The mountain loomed like a fortress between heaven and earth, its peak touched by the first light of morning. Deborah could feel the presence of the divine all around her, as if the mountain itself was alive with the breath of God. "Today," she said softly, "the Lord goes before us. The storm will come, but it will not be against us." The men listened, their fear tempered by her conviction. They saw in her something they could not explain, a strength that did not come from muscle or might, but from certainty. Deborah's presence was like a flame that refused to die, even in the fiercest wind. And as Barak raised his sword, the army roared, not in arrogance, but in faith. The march began. 10,000 men moved through the valleys, their footsteps pounding the earth in rhythm with their hope. The air was thick with dust and destiny, and every heartbeat seemed to echo through the hills. Deborah rode among them, her eyes lifted to the sky, as if already witnessing the miracle yet to unfold. Along the way, she spoke to them not as soldiers, but as sons of Israel. "Remember," she said, "we do not fight with our own hands, but with His will. Every battle begins in the heart before it is won on the field." Her words became the heartbeat of the army, steady and strong. As they reached the foothills of Mount Tabor, a strange stillness fell. The air felt charged, the skies heavy, as though the heavens themselves held their breath. Barak turned to Deborah, and she met his gaze with calm certainty. "This is the moment," she said. "Today you will see that no chariot, no army, and no man can stand against the will of the Almighty." Deborah lifted her face toward the wind, and the first rumble of thunder rolled across the valley. Heaven was answering. The wind grew heavier, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of divine intervention. As the army of Israel stood upon the slopes of Mount Tabor, Deborah's heart beat in perfect rhythm with the pulse of the heavens. She could feel it, the unseen movement of God preparing to act. Below, the valley darkened under the approach of Sisera's army, his 900 iron chariots glinting like serpents in the fading light. The earth itself seemed to tremble under their weight, but Deborah's gaze did not falter. Sisera's soldiers advanced with confidence, their chariots thundering like storms across the plains. They had crushed countless rebellions before, and the sight of Israel's smaller, poorly armed force drew laughter from their ranks. Yet Deborah stood tall beside Barak, her voice rising above the chaos like a bell cutting through the fog. "Arise, Barak," she cried, "for this is the day the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone before you?" At her words, something unexplainable ignited in the hearts of Israel's men. They charged forward, their cries echoing through the valley, a sound not of fear but of faith. As their feet struck the earth, the skies above began to roar. Thick clouds gathered with unnatural speed, swallowing the sun, and within moments the heavens opened. A torrent of rain poured down, drenching the fields and turning the ground into a sea of mud. The proud iron chariots that once symbolized power now became prisons of their own making. The wheels sank deep, the horses stumbled, and the soldiers screamed as chaos spread through the ranks. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled like the voice of judgment. It was not merely a storm. It was the hand of God striking against oppression. Deborah's eyes gleamed with holy fire as she watched the impossible unfold before her. Barak's army surged forward, striking down their enemies with a ferocity that could only have come from above. The men of Israel moved not as soldiers, but as instruments of divine justice. The rain washed away their fear, and with every clash of steel, they remembered who they were, the chosen people of the Almighty. Sisera, drenched and desperate, watched his grand army crumble before his eyes. The chariots that had once ruled the plains were nothing more than sinking monuments of pride. Terror gripped his heart as he realized that this battle was no longer his to command. He abandoned his chariot and fled on foot, his once mighty name now drowned by the sound of thunder and the cries of his defeated soldiers. Through the storm, Deborah stood unmoving, her robes soaked, her hair whipped by the wind. Yet, there was no fear in her eyes. She knew this victory did not belong to her or to Barak. It belonged to the Lord who had turned the heavens into a weapon of deliverance. The earth trembles, the skies pour, the stars fight in their courses, she whispered, quoting words that had been forming in her heart long before this day arrived. The rain continued to fall, cleansing the valley of blood and pride alike. The sound of chariots breaking under the weight of mud and storm echoed like a requiem for tyranny. Every soldier of Israel who lifted his sword that day felt the power of heaven guiding his arm. It was not just a victory, it was a revelation. When the storm began to ease, Barak searched the battlefield, his heart still pounding from the fury of the fight. The enemy lay scattered, but Sisera was nowhere to be found. The commander who had tormented Israel for 2 decades had vanished into the shadows of defeat. And though the men shouted for triumph, Deborah's eyes turned east, where the dark horizon met the light. She knew the prophecy was not yet complete. For somewhere beyond the chaos, another chapter of destiny was unfolding, one that would once again rest in the hands of a woman chosen by heaven. Far from the battlefield, as the last echoes of thunder faded into the horizon, Sisera stumbled through the wilderness, his armor heavy with mud and shame. The mighty commander who once inspired terror across the lands was now a fugitive, stripped of his power and pride. Each step he took was a reminder of the storm's wrath and the God who had turned nature itself against him. Exhausted, he searched desperately for shelter, unaware that destiny was quietly guiding his path. In the stillness beyond the hills stood a humble tent, the dwelling of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Her people had made peace with Sisera's king, so when she saw the weary commander approach, she greeted him with the kindness of a friend. "Come in, my lord," she said softly. "Do not be afraid." Her voice was calm, her hands gentle as she offered him milk and covered him with a blanket. To Sisera, who had lost everything, her hospitality felt like a sanctuary. But Jael's heart burned with a different kind of fire, the fire of righteousness. She had heard of Deborah, the prophetess who led Israel by faith, and of the God who was overturning kings and kingdoms. Deep inside, Jael knew this moment was not chance but calling. The man before her was the oppressor of her people, the very embodiment of cruelty and fear. And though she appeared fragile, the courage of heaven stirred within her. Sisera, exhausted and trusting, drank the milk and closed his eyes. "Stand at the entrance," he murmured weakly. "If anyone comes, tell them no man is here." Then, overcome by fatigue, he fell into a deep sleep, unaware that divine justice was standing over him in silence. Jael moved quietly, her footsteps barely disturbing the earth. She took a tent peg in one hand and a hammer in the other, simple tools of her household, yet now transformed into instruments of fate. She paused for a long moment, her breath steady, her gaze fixed on the sleeping warrior. The world outside was still, as if all creation was holding its breath. Then, with one swift and decisive motion, she struck. The sound was muffled, absorbed by the walls of the tent. The man who had enslaved a nation lay still, his pride crushed beneath the weight of his own sins. In that quiet, unassuming place, a prophecy whispered by Deborah beneath her palm tree came to life. The Lord will hand Sisera into the hands of a woman. When Barak arrived in pursuit, Jael stepped outside the tent, her face calm as dawn. "Come," she said simply, "and I will show you the man you seek." Inside lay Sisera, motionless. His story ended not on the battlefield, but in the tent of a woman whose courage defied empires. Barak stood in silence, humbled by what he saw. He understood at last that victory was not a matter of strength, but of obedience to the divine will. The news spread swiftly through the land of Israel. The people who once trembled now sang. Deborah's prophecy had been fulfilled, and through Jael's hand, God had delivered his people from the hand of their enemy. The storm had passed, and the valley that once echoed with cries of fear now sang with freedom. That night, Deborah lifted her eyes to the heavens and thanked the Lord for his justice. She saw in Jael not just a woman, but a vessel of divine purpose, proof that when faith and courage meet, miracles unfold in the most unexpected places. The morning that followed was unlike any other. The sky shone brighter, the air carried the scent of peace, and the hearts of Israel were light again. From the depths of oppression, they had risen by faith, led not by kings or swords, but by the unseen power of heaven and the hands of two women who dared to believe. And as the sun broke through the clouds, Deborah knew this victory was not the end, but the beginning of a new song, one that would echo across generations, a melody of faith, courage, and divine justice. When dawn stretched across the horizon, Deborah stood before her people, her heart overflowing with gratitude and awe. The battlefield was silent now, the echoes of war replaced by the whispers of peace. She raised her arms toward the heavens, her voice strong and radiant, carrying through the valleys that had once trembled with fear. What poured from her lips was not a command nor a judgment. It was a song of victory, of faith, and of the boundless mercy of God. Her words rose like incense, weaving through the morning air, a hymn that glorified the Lord who commands the storms, the God who turns the weak into warriors and the overlooked into instruments of his will. Deborah sang of the trembling earth, of the thunder that shattered the pride of the mighty, and of the woman who struck down the tyrant when all hope seemed lost. Her song became the heartbeat of a nation reborn. As her voice echoed through the hills, the people gathered around her, tears streaming down their faces. They saw not just a prophetess, but a mother of Israel, one who had carried them from despair to deliverance. In her melody, they heard the truth that power belongs not to armies or kings, but to those who stand firm in faith. Deborah's song did not celebrate conquest. It celebrated divine justice, the unseen hand that lifts the humble and brings down the proud. Blessed be Jael among women, Deborah sang, honoring the one who fulfilled the prophecy in silence and courage. The people repeated her words, and the name of Jael spread through the tribes like holy fire. Together, they rejoiced, not merely for victory, but for revelation. They had witnessed with their own eyes that God does not choose the mighty, He chooses the willing. When the final note of Deborah's song faded, a stillness settled over the land, the kind of peace that only follows when God Himself has fought the battle. Israel rested from war, and under Deborah's leadership, the land knew harmony for 40 years. She became not just a symbol of faith, but a living testament that obedience to divine purpose can rewrite destiny itself. Generations later, children would sit by the fire listening to the story of the woman who judged beneath the palm tree, who called upon heaven and defied the impossible. Her name would be spoken with reverence, her courage woven into the fabric of their faith. And each time her story was told, hearts would be rekindled with the reminder that true strength does not come from power, but from conviction. Deborah's life became a mirror of divine truth, that when darkness covers the earth, light does not always come in the form of kings or warriors. Sometimes it comes as a woman with unwavering faith, sitting beneath a palm tree, listening to the voice of God. Her legacy lived on, not in monuments or scrolls, but in the courage of every soul who chose faith over fear, obedience over pride, and purpose over comfort. Through her, generations would learn that every act of faith, no matter how small, can echo through eternity. Her story became a reminder that destiny bows before those who dare to trust in something greater than themselves. Deborah's palm still stood, its roots deep in sacred soil, as if heaven itself had planted it to testify that God's promises never fade. As the sun dipped below the hills and the people of Israel returned to their homes, Deborah lingered beneath her tree, her heart at peace. She knew her work was done, but her message would live forever. She whispered a final prayer of thanks, her eyes glistening in the fading light. The world had changed because she listened and obeyed. And to those who hear her story today, her voice still speaks. Be brave, have faith, and never doubt the calling placed upon your life. For even in the darkest hour, heaven is waiting for someone to rise, just as Deborah did, with light in their soul and courage in their heart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join this journey of faith, courage, and divine purpose. Let's keep spreading messages that remind the world that miracles still happen for those who believe.